Welcome back. In this video, we'll look at the camera controller. So far we've got our player being able to move around the scene, but obviously there's a bit of an issue. When we hit play, the ball does can potentially come out of the camera view, plus our camera perspective at the moment is a little, going to be hard to sort of use. There goes the ball. Right, it's not following it around. It's probably fallen off the screen at the moment. But yeah, we don't have any control over where our camera is. Now we're going to put in a very simple camera controller. It's basically going to mirror the ball's position. But first, let's sort of get our camera looking a little bit better in terms of its position. So if I click on the camera itself, what you'll notice is there's main camera. There's a little smaller window that pops up, and we can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to move the camera up a little bit so it's a bit higher. In fact, let me move the ball down just to give it sort of this is where it will be, so that would be 0.5. There we go. Click on the camera. And that doesn't seem too bad. Maybe I'll lift it up a little bit higher, maybe sort of like a 5. And then what I'll do is I'll rotate that camera as well. So if you can sort of see, that's our position of our camera. It's just sort of behind the ball and a little bit higher, right? We can sort of see that there. If I click over here, you can see that very clearly, especially if I click on this, which is the orthographic view. So there is our ball. We can't see the ground, the plane, because it really has no thickness, but we can see there is our ball and camera, right? Our marble and our camera. Now, there is also not just being able to move it that way, we can select it so that it's on the rotate. And if you see here, we can kind of rotate and give it a little bit of a downward perspective. So what I like to do is sort of rotate it a little bit and then maybe sort of clean up that number. So at the moment, it was almost 25 degrees. Let's just make that 25 degrees. So what we've got here is in relation to the ball, because the ball was sort of centered, it's basically kind of 5 units above it, and then it's 10 units behind it. And then we've given a rotation of about 25 degrees there. And like I said, we can kind of see it here. It looks pretty good, okay? Now, even if we hit play, though, we still have a bit of a problem in the sense that the ball can disappear outside of the camera's view, and now we have no idea, where the ball is. Am I still on the ground, or have I fallen off? No idea. So what we want to do is have that camera move, like I said, in lockstep, sort of mirror that movement of the ball. In order to do that, we need to create a script. So I'm going to go back to my project window, back to my scripts folder. So for outside of that, just double click on scripts, and we're going to add a new script. Basically, anytime we've got a different object, we're going to add a new script to give it functionality. So I'm going to go under create again, second thing down, C# script. Before I click or do anything, let's change the name. And I'm going to call this one camera controller. So we had a marble controller. Now we have a camera controller. It will place it alphabetically here, so double click on it, and we'll go in, and we're faced with the same code that we had before. Making sure, again, camera controller, those match up. Now, on this one, we're going to create a variable as well. We're going to actually create 2 variables, and they're going to hold 2 pieces of information. Our first one, and we're going to make this public again, just so that we can see it. We're going to make a vector 3. Okay, so it's going to take an x, y, and z value, and we're going to call this one the offset. We're going to measure how far away the camera is from the player, and then we're going to maintain that distance throughout the game. The other thing we need to know is the player. The script here doesn't know who the player is, so we're going to create a public, just to make it easy. This time it's going to be of the type game object, because the player is a game object. And then we're going to take, we'll call it player, give it a name. So again, very clear variables describing what's going to happen. Let's just save that and see what's happened here. Go back to Unity. And so we've created a script. Now, always remember the script we haven't applied to the camera yet. So this script is sitting here. It's useless. It's not doing anything. So we need to make sure we grab it and add it to that object. We can see that the offset, like I mentioned, was a vector 3. There is our vector 3, x, y, and z. And then this one, player, it says none. It's looking for the game object. Now, there's different ways in the code you can actually get it to find the game object. We'll just make it very simple here. The game object that we're trying to find is the marble. I'm just going to drag that right in. And because the marble is a game object, it's happy. Now, if I hit play here, nothing's really going to happen, okay? We still don't have the camera moving. So we need to go in and add a bit more code. So let's go back to Microsoft's Code Studio here and go into the start. What we have to do is at the very start, we have to measure what this offset is. So we're going to set that, and we're going to say it's the difference between the camera's position, so transform.position of the camera, minus the player's transform.position. It's almost helping me out here, .position, but there we go. Let's just talk about that in a second. Okay, so let's go back to Unity and just talk about what's going on here. The camera has a position, right? So there was a this dot transform dot position. That relates to the camera's position. And so the camera has an X, Y, and Z value. We're subtracting the player's position from it. So the player's dot transform dot position. So again, the player, click on the player there, it has a transform dot position, X, Y, and Z. Basically, it's going to find the difference between them. So if you look here, the difference between the camera on the X is going to be 0. The Y, I think it's going to be 4.5. And then on the Z, it's going to be sort of -10. So we're actually going to be able to see that on the camera script, right? We're going to be able to see that when I hit play here. So I think everything's in place. I'm going to hit play. It's going to actually do the measurement. If, I think I forgot to hit save. So there's a little mistake from Mr. Fleming. Make sure that you hit save there. So if it doesn't work out, always go back and double check that your code is saved, okay? And there's no asterisk there. I'm going to go back and try that again. I'm going to hit play. And there it is. And so just like I suspected, the 0 on the X, there's no difference because those both were the same. Because there was a 0.5 and 5, the difference between them is 4.5. And then that last one, because it was 0 and -10, the difference there is -10. Now, just to show you something else, if I pulled off the marble one, so if I actually made this none, okay, so let's just say I forgot to say who the object was, I'm actually going to get an error. It's going to say to me, hey, the camera controller player, variable player, has not been assigned. It doesn't know who the player is. So it's not smart enough to just sort of decide that this is the player. We need to specifically tell it. So dragging it in there will ensure that it works. Okay, so once I do that, there's no error there. Okay, now it's still no good because the camera doesn't follow. So we have to do one more line of code, and that will ensure that the ball, or sorry, the camera follows the ball, right? Follows the marble there. So I'm going to come into update. This one, it doesn't really matter if I use fixed update or just update. That's not going to, it's not using physics, so we're fine there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this.transform.position. Okay, so what I'm going to do is change the position of the camera. So I'm going to set the camera's position basically. And so what I'm going to do is do the player's position, so player.transform.position, and then I'm going to just add on the offset. So what's happening here is it takes the player's position and then adds the difference. And that will ensure that the location is always the same. So let's take a little look here, make sure I save it. I almost didn't save it. Go back to Unity. And what I'm going to do is hit play. I'm going to make sure down here that it did measure it. Okay, perfect. Click into there. And then as I move the ball to the left, you'll notice that the camera moves to the left. If I move the ball to the right, the camera goes to the right. Same thing forward and backward. So basically now they just move in lockstep. They maintain that offset forever, right? That difference in the positions is going to be the same. However, now as the ball moves, the camera moves as well. We can kind of see that if I click to the scene here, we can see, right, as it moves, that camera is just following that ball, but keeping that same distance. And eventually, if that ball, it will fall off the screen in a second, then the camera is going to follow it down as well. And you can kind of see here, it's just going to follow it into oblivion, right? It's going to keep going forever there. So we've got now a very, very simple camera controller. It'll be sort of good enough for our game. When we do the modifications, you might choose to make a more sophisticated camera controller. But our primary goal here was to prevent the ball from disappearing from our view. And so as long as we sort of move the ball, the camera will follow, and that allows us to ensure that the player is always going to be visible. Now, obviously, the next problem we got to deal with is that our ball is falling off our world, so we're going to put in a wall next.